Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Poland. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Hartford Public Library, and I want to welcome you here to the library and to the Center for Contemporary Culture. I'm pleased that you're all here tonight to have a discussion about a very important and relevant issue, the topic of hyper-incarceration. Here at the library, we witness every day the impact of Connecticut's criminal justice system when our customers, many of whom are ex-offenders, come in for help with finding a job, writing a resume, or getting their GED. We host special workshops for those who have recently re-entered our community and are looking for guidance and support. And we have partnered with organizations that provide professional legal advice and education to individuals and families who are struggling to navigate the often overwhelming justice system. It is clear that the effects of incarceration touch much more than simply the offender. They have a broad reach into the families and neighborhoods of Hartford and across the state, and it's so critical that as a society we consistently evaluate how this justice system works and does not work, and continue to seek ways to improve upon it. The book you will hear discussed today, The Justice Imperative, does just that. I'd like to thank the Malta Justice Initiative, our partner in this discussion tonight, for publishing such an important book and for their tireless work advocating for Connecticut's incarcerated population, facilitating the return of former offenders to their families and communities, and raising awareness about the issues facing our criminal justice system today. It is my pleasure to now welcome Edward Quinlan of the Malta Justice Initiative to speak with you tonight. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Matt. And I really would like to thank you and Richard and the Hartford Public Library for inviting us here. And in talking with both of you beforehand, I was both delighted and impressed to hear how involved you guys are with your community and how you've taken such an important and vital interest in issues that, like this one, that affect us all. I guess this presentation is, in the main, about three things. It's about telling you how broken our correctional system in this nation and here in Connecticut really is. It's very, very broken. And the second thing it's about is to tell you that it does not have to be broken. That there are ways to fix the system, and that there have been approaches in other states that have been enacted and that are proving results. So it's not as though what I'm going to be recommending at the end, or we're recommending at the end, has never been done before. There's provable, measured practice out there. So, talk about how it's broken, how it got to be broken, how it can be fixed, in our view. And then the third part is really critical. It's a call to action. Ideally, what we would really love to do is to engage as many of you as we can, who hopefully will be interested in participating as informed citizens in helping us to fix it. Because fixing it is going to involve policy change, chiefly legislative change, administrative, but mostly legislative change. And the way legislative change occurs most effectively is that when legislators hear in large, loud and clear from large numbers of citizens about issues that they are concerned about, that has an impact. So, a little bit of history. How this came together is the result of an initiative by the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta are a lay Catholic men's group. Their charter and their tradition goes back centuries, 1,000 years, a long time. I'm not certain. And like lay groups, volunteer groups in many churches, they have a mission, and that is to help people in need. And I think the way this thing started, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy. By the way, there's my colleague, Kathy Taylor, sitting in the back there, who is the executive director of the Malta initiative. And Kathy's going to get a little bit more involved later on. I think these guys started visiting people in prison and started to realize how serious their needs were. And being some pretty sharp fellows, they got educated. They started reading and learning about not only the plight of the people they were visiting, but the larger environment in which they existed. And they very soon draw the conclusion that this is a broken system. And so they took it upon themselves to try and do something to fix it. And the methodology they chose was to write a book, this book, designed for public consumption, not lots of legalese, technical, academic language, so readily understandable, as short as possible. It is fairly short. It's only about that thick, and it's only about 12 chapters or so. And the idea was to go around and present this book, or this is one of the ways that we're trying to get the word out to groups such as yourselves. We'll be selling this book tonight in order to raise funds at $10 a pop. But the book is not just an end unto itself, it's a means to a larger end. And that is not just to get people educated, but hopefully convince them that this need is sufficiently serious that they will become, hopefully some of you will become motivated to help us reform the system by becoming part of a citizen constituency to change laws in Connecticut, chiefly sentencing laws. This slide here gives you a bird's eye view, a quick picture of one of the ways in which you can see that the situation in this country is so serious. So this is incarcerated Americans, as you can see, starting in 1920, going all the way over to about 1970. It's pretty flat, right? In 1970, you start to see the curve slope up. By the time you get into the 80s and the 90s, it's a vertical curve. And through that period, start off at 1970, because that's where our focus is going to be. You can see that the population is, say, 300,000 or so. And if you go all the way up to 2008, you're pushing 2,500,000 inmates incarcerated in this country. Give me a second here to get this stuff together. So I'm going to be presenting you with lots of facts and statistics like this. Too many to remember, but hopefully they'll leave an impact. Here are a few. The current population in Connecticut is about 16,500. That's a national chart. A couple of years ago, it was up to about 19,000. There are another 45,000 people in Connecticut under supervision as probationers. Another 5,000 people on top of that who are on parole. So there's probably 70,000 people overall under some kind of supervision in the criminal justice system in Connecticut. Our concern is principally about the incarcerated population. 95% of all offenders or better are released someday, and then they're living with you and me, and they're not very well prepared to do so. Connecticut currently releases 20,000 inmates per year. Most of them, more than half, Sometimes substantially more than half don't make it. So we have a revolving door. They keep on coming back again. The system costs huge sums of money. On a per-bed basis, the cost in Connecticut is $51,000, $35,000 or so, but if you factor in retirement benefits and all that, that's what you get. Here's how we compare with the rest of the world. This is a stunning statistic, in my view. We have the highest incarceration rate per capita on the entire planet. That's us, the bar way up on top. And the number that you can't see there is 750. That's 750 persons per 100,000. Go all the way down to other Western democracies in Europe. Take a look at that stripe of people in there. There's countries from other parts of the world in there. They're a fraction of that. They're 150. They're at 100. It's been like this for a long, long time. And so what that statistic says to me, and should say to all of us, is it doesn't have to be this way because it's not like this elsewhere. Because those elsewhere places have systems in place that work far better than ours, at far less cost, and at crime rates no greater than ours. Crime rates no greater than ours, and oftentimes a lot less. So, if I told you that there is a better, more efficient, lower cost way of doing this, would you be interested? These are the questions that we want to ask citizen groups. I think most people would say yes. Is there a lower cost alternative for locking up nonviolent, or for dealing with nonviolent people rather than locking them up? The answer to that question is yes. If I told you that we could accomplish the kinds of reforms that we're looking at here without reducing public safety, would you be interested in that? I think most people would say yes to that. Would it lower crime rates? Most people would say that if I told you such a system could be implemented, and it can. Now what if I told you that the kinds of reforms that I'm going to be talking about have support now already, not in the future, not pie in the sky, support now from both progressives on the left and very conservative people on the right, conservative Republicans, liberal Democrats. The kinds of reforms we're talking about are already happening in other states. So what we think is that this is the time to strike because the iron is hot. There are some ideas which are valid and sound, but will never be implemented because the timing isn't right. This is what I call an idea in good currency, which is a term that was coined by a guy named Russell Akoff 40 years or so ago, who was an organizational theorist. And he was talking about the timing and how to tell whether or not you have an idea or a concept that everybody might agree is a good one, and how to tell when it is that you can finally integrate it into some kind of system. This is an idea in good currency right now because it's already happening. And because of that, this is the time to initiate a push to reform the system. In Connecticut, in the juvenile system, we are in part already there. Our own juvenile system, which does have a long way to go, has already initiated some reforms that move offenders in the direction of community alternatives rather than incarceration. And there's data out there to support the success of those reforms. All of this began, I alluded to a few minutes ago, with the war on drugs in the 1970s. So that's been a 40-year war. In the 1970s, the prison population was about 300,000 people, over 2.3 million people today. Sorry, I showed you that slide. 750 per thousand, showed you that slide. Sorry, I'm getting behind myself. So what are some other states doing? I said that there are programs that are going on in other places that are working. In Texas, after building 38 new prisons in the 1990s, they've stopped building new prisons. Rather than spending $2 billion in the mid-2000s on 3 new prisons, it's invested $241 million in treatment programs and expanding probation. Crime rates fell. They closed 3 prisons. Michigan reduced its prison population by 12%. Recidivism dropped from 50 to 33%. They cut spending by 12%. They closed 21 facilities. Crime fell between 2000 and 2005. Missouri, in 2004, the recidivism rate in that state was at 4%, the third highest in the United States. Within 10 years, they drove the rate down to 36%. Oregon has achieved a recidivism rate of 22.8%, roughly half of the U.S. average. So that demonstrates very clearly what's possible. You can go from 6 to 10 down to 2 to 10. Now that's halting and reversing, if you will, the revolving door. New York City, under the previous administration, don't know what the new one will do, the inmate population fell by 33%. Major felonies fell by 32%. Murders dropped in half. In New York State, as a result of sentencing reform and other measures, New York's prison population fell from 73,000 in 1999 to 60,000 in 2008. Violent crime per 100,000 per capita crime rate fell from 1,164 in 1991 to 398 in 2008. So that's a 75% drop. Kentucky estimates it will save $422 million over 10 years by diverting nonviolent drug offenders into treatment programs rather than prison. Here's a more controversial initiative. The University of Sing Sing is an illustration of what's possible through a privately run college program operated by Mercy College. And in this program, inmates at Sing Sing who toe the line and stay out of trouble can earn a college degree. The recidivism rate for those guys is 2% over a 16-year period. That's impressive. So these positive results, which are powerful results, which are results that are based on proven practices that have been well researched, are out there. They aren't pie in the sky kinds of alternatives. What about cost of all this? From 1987 to 2011, spending by states and corrections went from $10.6 billion to $52 billion, a 5-fold increase. Let me catch up with my slides. There you see the expenditures for the state of Connecticut. Don't know if you can see all of this. From 1985 until 2010.
We need you to stay near a mic so we can get you on video.
Oh,
So
all right, I can hold that? Great, thanks. So Connecticut's corrections budget has skyrocketed at a phenomenal rate. It's gone from $45.3 million in 1986 to $627 million in 2006. That's an increase of 1,300%. If you add in DOC employee health benefits and costs, the annual cost for Connecticut exceeds $1 billion. We're a small state. 1 in 8 state employees in Connecticut work in corrections. 1980 to 1985, Connecticut spent more than $1 billion on new prisons. During the 1990s, a new prison was built in the United States every 15 days. The annual cost per bed in Connecticut, we went over that, is $51,000 when you factor in retirement benefits. In New York, it is measured that the cost of housing and caring for prisoners 50 years or older is 2 to 4 times than it would be otherwise. Are we any safer for having done all of this? Analysts indicate that a 10% increase in the incarceration rate yields at best a 2 to 4% drop in time. So when you incarcerate people while they're locked up, does that affect public safety? Yes, it does. Should we be incarcerating violent people? Yes. People that are going to hurt somebody else. Should we be incarcerating some people indefinitely for the rest of their lives? Yes. But that's not the majority of the people. For most everybody else, the view that incarceration is the solution to our problem is much like the problem, a personal problem, let's say, that any one of us has had that we want to avoid. It kind of looks good if I do this, but I'm really not getting at the root of the problem, and incarceration doesn't either. Our spending on corrections is the second fastest growing item in the state's general budget. Here is, I want to skip some of these. Here is a powerful statistic. While all of these incarceration rates have been skyrocketing, as you saw in that chart before, from 1970 up to the current time, have the crime rates been going up? No. The crime rates have been going down. So if you plotted the crime rates on an axis going across the increasing prison population axis, you'd see that we were building prisons while the crime rate was going down. As a matter of fact, the crime rate was going down before many of these get tough on crime initiatives were enacted. So what we're doing from any point of view, certainly from that point of view, makes no sense at all. One of the things that we don't do in our book is that, except by way of mentioning it, is that we don't deal with the extent to which poverty contributes to the incarcerated rate. Urban poverty in Connecticut and in states all throughout the country is a powerful engine, a major driving force, the largest single contributor to our inmate populations. And we are, as one of our presenters put it at another one of these meetings, we're incarcerating whole neighborhoods. We're decimating entire neighborhoods. If those communities weren't destroyed already, we're helping to destroy them now by what it is that we're doing. Incarcerating entire neighborhoods is what we're doing. So until we do something systematic about addressing that problem in an entirely new way, with new ideas, fresh perspectives, the extent to which this initiative can be successful is limited. There's no doubt in my mind that the anti-poverty initiative that was begun with OEO and community action agencies in the Johnson administration in the 1960s, if you fast forward to now, there's no doubt that millions and millions of people, because they could avail themselves of those services, were able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, become independent, work their way into the middle class. It's also clear that over that same period, that large numbers of the clients of community action agencies, parents and grandparents, were clients of the same agencies 40 years ago. So that system is stuck. And that population and our population overlay to a large extent. It's important, I think, to mention that because this problem doesn't exist in a vacuum. and that's a big part of the issue. This is what we'd like to achieve. Our major goals are to reduce Connecticut's prison population, especially nonviolent offenders who pose a low risk to the public safety, in half within 5 years. We want to reduce Connecticut's prison population by 50% in 5 years. That's an aggressive goal. We want to reduce Connecticut's recidivism rate by 30 percentage points or more within 5 years. Also very aggressive. What that means is that we can't just close the prisons. What we have to do is think very carefully about what the needs are of the offenders that we have in our system, not only when they get out of prison, hopefully after serving less time, or when they're being diverted from prison to begin with. It means assessing their needs in a comprehensive way and developing plans that address those needs and helping them sustain a path towards good citizenship, job, employment, solid family ties, and no crime. So we have to replace something that's not so good with something that's a lot better. When this state and many others closed mental institutions some years ago, the idea was we would replace the services provided by mental institutions with a vast array of comprehensive services designed to help people who are mentally ill. Well, we closed the institutions, but we didn't do the second part of it. So the two parts have to operate in tandem. We want to reduce the spending on the prison system by half in 5 years, and this is important. This is referred to as justice reinvestment, with 2/3 of the savings redirected to proven evidence-based drug and mental health treatments, educational and vocational programs, post-release support supervision programs, and the like. So that's where the money would come from. So if we can get the institutions closed, the money to support these initiatives is there. It isn't new money. Has this been done in other states? Yes, it has. It's part of some of these initiatives that I mentioned elsewhere. I think in order to do this, in order to succeed, we have to think differently, which this whole presentation suggests, about how we deal with offenders. And I'm thinking of one specific aspect of it. We have to change the definition of what get tough on crime means. Get tough on crime does not mean locking people up for a long period of time, because that gives us a false sense of safety, because those folks get out of jail. Chance eventually anyway, then they're living with you and me, and chances are they're more dangerous. It really is a sense of false security. And we need to convince not only ourselves, but the people that we're trying to convince in the legislature that what we're proposing is really what's tough on crime. What's going to be required going forward is asking people, as I mentioned at the beginning, who might be interested to help us out. And helping us out means there's a legislative session coming up, so that means attending public hearings, testifying at public hearings, making telephone calls, selling books, holding meetings with friends, and so forth. So that is our general call to action for you. And Kathy is going to be collecting, if you'd like to give it to us, your name and email address. You might want to indicate whether or not you think you'd be interested in helping us out, or give us your email address if you would just like us to stay in contact with you. And we're going to be working on all of this pretty soon. So Okay. So that's it, in a large nutshell. Questions? Ma'am.
Thank you. This is very interesting. I think a lot of here, a lot of knowledge about this as well. But I think the quandary that we find ourselves in Connecticut, one in an election year, you pointed out, no one wants to be perceived as being soft on crime. So how do you, well, who have you found to be your allies in the legislature who understand this from a fiscal perspective, this from a reunification perspective when it comes to families, this from an economic development perspective, who can get kind of past that very narrow-minded view of not coddling, offenders and not being perceived as soft on crime, but really looking at the larger picture and how this can really help move our state forward. It's very sad to see states like Texas being ahead of the game on this issue in comparison to us here in Connecticut.
I agree. The major point you want to make, though, is this is what we have to do to convince our legislators, or how are we going to do it in light of the fact that there's an election coming up? I think there are going to be all kinds of election year politics. There already have been. There was a criticism in the press not too long ago about an initiative that the legislature passed in 2011, which connected giving good time to inmates if they participated in certain programs designed to help them get out of prison, and that it was abused, and so on and so forth. It was a politically based criticism. It wasn't accurate. If they were predicting an enormous increase in crime as a result of this program, well, then we would have seen one. But we released 20, 40,000 people in that period of time, and the crime rate in Connecticut hasn't gone up, it's gone down by 7% or so. So you do have to fight people with facts. But I think the first steps are to become informed, read the book. If you know your legislator, we're going to be asking people to go meet with your legislator, give that person a copy of the book in person, see if you can engage them in some conversation about it. Write your legislator, call your legislator, all of those kinds of things on a collective basis. You might feel as though as an individual I'm not getting anything done, but on a massive basis, if enough people get organized, those kinds of citizen-based initiatives can and do move mountains. And because it is an idea in good currency, then you're giving some legislators who might not otherwise be interested in this some very responsible cover. So that's as best as I can respond to that right now. I just think that that's what we have to do. People are going to change. Some people are going to change their positions after the election, obviously. But that's okay because that's when the legislature opens. Sir.
Good evening. So I'm a legislator, and everything you presented this evening, I don't think there's anyone here that didn't know these facts. Most
Right.
people who I know here were quite aware of these facts that we have here. I came to hear some of your solutions. Now, this is your desired outcomes, but I would like to know, unless it's in the book, because I'm definitely going to buy the book, how you going to get there? Because I would love to close half the state correctional facility within 5 years. I just don't know how we're going to get there. I mean, just having a state prison itself is political, because state prisons provide employment, and we're in a state that has not done much in employing people. So there will be an argument out there by some people, we need to have these facilities just to keep people employed.
I'm sorry, what?
So my point is, I hope that when I purchase this book, that there are some suggestions that outline. Yeah. Well, that's what I came to hear more of them, because I could read these facts and stats all night long, but I'm looking for some solutions. And I guess
They are in there, and you'll see a very extensive list of recommendations in all of these areas. A few of them are, I mean, there were just too many to rattle off, but some of the key ones are to eliminate mandatory sentences in which the judge has no discretion and winds up having to lock someone up for an extended period of time, and he has no other way out. And a big example of the abuse that's occurred there has been with all of the crack cocaine convictions involving minority offenders. There is a danger, and you would know this in the legislature at the other end, that what we have to be careful, however, with what we replace that with. We say in there that we want judges to have more discretion, but there are plenty of studies over the years that show that under a given set of circumstances, Judge A gives a fellow, you have an indeterminate sentence, 4 years, and the other guy gives him 8. Same offender, same offense, same sets of circumstances. So, in my view, there does need to be a sentencing structure that, like the one we tried to get through years ago, in which the federal system used to operate, that has a grid where, if you're familiar with those, where the judge would have a series of options within which he operates, but he could deviate from the option if he stated his reason in writing. And there are other models for that. The Supreme Court struck down some of that a few years ago for the federal system, but that kind of stuff is possible. So you change the sentencing structure, you change the length of the sentences, you drastically reduce the number of people who are getting incarcerative sentences to begin with, and you shift those people over to community alternatives. And then you base, through a very comprehensive assessment, the shape of that alternative by looking at the needs of that particular person and working with that person, both in terms of supervision and services, to meet all of those needs. One of the members of our group made, I forgot whether we mentioned it in here, made another excellent point, and that is you replace you use community alternatives instead of incarcerative, and you eliminate a lot of them and you get them off the books. And her point was, even diversion for some people, we ought to shut the system off to some people so that there's no rest at all, so you can't even turn the spigot on in the front end. And an example of that would be at the arrest level, where we became aware of a police officer in the Midwest someplace who was arresting people right and left. He was a tough guy. He wanted to see people locked up, and that's what they deserved, and so on and so forth. And after a few years, he began to realize he wasn't helping anybody. And he began to realize that a lot of the people that he was arresting had mental health and other serious kinds of behavioral problems that couldn't be dealt with by the criminal justice system. So he educated himself on the availability of mental health services. And he started, instead of arresting people, referring them to appropriate mental health services. And he found that that worked. And then he started training other police officers on the same thing. And then he quit his job and he goes all around the country and he trains people on, police officers on, don't let people into the system to begin with. Because once they're in, they're labeled, and then you're on your way. So a great deal can be accomplished at that level by simply not letting people come into the system. So you go along the whole continuum from arrest all the way through parole. But there are many specific recommendations in there, and they are based on initiatives that have worked in other states and have been measured in all kinds of ways, not the least of which is reducing crime rates, and have been shown to be effective. I don't know if that's helping you or not, but you'll see a lot in that book.
How you doing, Ed? Since I have the mic, I guess it's my turn to ask a question. I work in the system, so I have to be careful sometimes when I talk because people remember what I do for a living, and I'm not always speaking on behalf of my employer. And it's very difficult to reform the system from within. But the bigger challenge from without is that you mentioned the word urban one time in your presentation. After your presentation, you entered the word minority. And to me, that's the pink elephant in the room. This is a cross-cultural group. That's what's needed from without to really, initiate change, because Connecticut has the highest rate of incarceration when it comes to minorities for any state in New England.
It's true.
We lead New England. You know this, right?
It's true.
And we don't discuss it. And you talked about the juvenile system as an example. They did reduce their numbers, but they did nothing to reduce disparity. So the number of juveniles who go to juvenile detention went down. I work for judicial. We closed a juvenile detention center in New Haven. But if you walk into Hartford or Bridgeport on any day, all the kids are brown. So somehow, when we reduce numbers, we still don't deal with inequality. And so you say solutions? Why not pardon some folks? A law that just took effect today, certificates of rehabilitation, we call them employability. This representative here was instrumental in supporting this. And what it does, it says is, if you have a criminal conviction, this doesn't erase it, but it says to a prospective employer or licensing entity that you cannot deny this person a job or a license based solely on their prior record. Their crime has to have a relationship to the job or the license. We think there's value to that, but we don't know who's going to talk to the businesses and convince them. We don't know when someone is denied that the individual has a right of action to turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, you denied me against the law, because I can find another reason. Just like when the police officer pulls me over, he can find another reason why he pulled me over.
Sure.
It wasn't because you were black, it was because of this.
Right.
You failed to signal, whatever it is. We have to deal with the issue, and I hope that the book takes this issue on head on, because until we deal with that, we're going to stand out as having a race problem, not just in Connecticut, but throughout America, where communities of color have no confidence in the police, no confidence in the courts, and no confidence in corrections. And they're losing confidence, like many Americans, in the job climate, because the jobs are not there. We hired 6 probation officers. We had 4,000 applicants for 6 jobs. Everybody wants to be a probation officer. To make a difference in people's lives, they want the job security. They want that 6-figure salary after 10 years. They want to lift their family up and move to the suburbs. So if I'm stigmatized by incarceration or prior record, I have a hard way to go. And so we might be preaching to the choir, but the choir is so small, they don't have to be listened to. I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but
No,
hope
I mean,
that what
I think
Malta
that's
is trying to do is not only inform legislators, but the business community as well.
It's a good soapbox to stand on, and it does need to be part of the solution. We do have a relationship. We've begun talking with people from CBIA. One of our recommendations is to provide some protection and civil immunity to employers who hire ex-offenders, to create taxes and incentives to encourage state employers to hire ex-offenders, and to do something about the fact that if you're an ex-offender, there's all kinds of licenses that you can't get. I mean, you're stuck at a McDonald's job. I mean, I know that's part of what you're talking about. But please read the book and get back to us. And let us know what you think. What recommendations would you add? Read the book, read the recommendations. You're right. You're right. How effective we'll be in addressing those issues remains to be seen, but that's what we're working on.
But I'll say to you, I've read hundreds of books,
Yeah,
thousands. That's what I do.
yeah,
My Kindle is loaded with nothing but.
yeah.
And every day the UPS man comes, there's something from Amazon coming from him.
Well, let me ask you this question then.
But
What do you believe we should do to address those issues specifically? Because that's part of our goal.
Wow. Okay, so I work in the system again, so I have to be nice to my employers.
Well, we can
I
talk
think
later
that
off,
we
we can talk
can-
later off the record.
We can start by demanding that more people are pardoned so that they're not carrying that ball and chain in their efforts to go forward. We can start there. That's already happened, and people have proven, they have demonstrated that they moved away from criminal behavior, yet they are not granted pardons. We don't grant pardons in this state.
We have that in here, I believe.
So it's a mechanism that, people apply and everybody ends up unhappy. So we can deal with those who are already in. We can deal with the front end of diverting people so they're not even arrested, that we can push people out or push them to social services. If I go home tonight and hit my wife, not that I would, she might hit me. Domestic violence is on a lot of people's minds. If I go home tonight and hit my wife, if she calls the police, I'm getting arrested. If she calls her lawyer, he's going into civil court tomorrow and getting a protective order. Okay? It's never going to hit anything. It's a civil matter. It's private. I'm not stigmatized by that. It's the same behavior, but it's dealt with in a different way. We have to take a different approach to dealing with issues that are plaguing communities that are already suffering. Because when you take these young men out and you stigmatize them, you almost give them no option beyond what the limited options that they have. So we can do front end, we can do back end, but we have to have a business community that is incentivized to hire folks. And then not lastly, there's many things that we can do. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that the jobs that are out there are just as attractive as being a corrections officer. So when this thing took off and I entered the corrections field in the early 80s, somebody said something to me that always stuck. They said it's ironic that opportunities for blacks in this field are increasing because of the number of blacks going into prison. And I said, well then, my job is to put myself out of work. Because if my paycheck comes from somebody else's suffering, I don't want to earn a paycheck that way. And here we are, I'm a lot older. People who know me, I had an afro back then. And I don't think we've gotten better. So I mean, it's nice that there's efforts and there's a book about this, but the issue is well documented, and the challenges are still many. And the last thing I'll say, and please, somebody else take the mic from me, we cannot do this because we're broke. That can't be the motivation. We don't have money, so we can't do this no more. My mother passed away a couple of years ago. And when I got the bill after she passed away from the hospital and the nursing home, it scared me. I've never gotten a bill for $1 million. I was like, whoa, what did y'all do? It cost. Now, she was in care for about 7 months between the hospital and the nursing home. The nursing home bill, when I projected it, it was about $400,000 a year. That's an institution. We've created another industrial complex, this medical industrial complex. And we're telling people that's where you should go because the jobs are there. But is that the right thing to do? So if we only want to reform the system because we're broke, what happens when we have some money? Are we going to bring it all back? Are we going to ride that wave? We have to do it because it's the right thing to do, to build family and community, So when I hear that, it's like it's an opportune time because everybody wants to save a buck. But that can't be the motivation.
I agree with that point. There are a lot of us who have been working on these kinds of issues on and off for decades and really haven't been able to get anywheres. And I will say, despite the motivation of cost and no other motivation coming from that quarter, I think I'd be crazy, or we would be crazy, to turn down an opportunity to get things where we need them to go. It's just an opportunity I think that we would be remiss on passing up because their motivation is wrong. Maybe in the process people can get educated. Maybe like that cop, he realized he was doing the wrong thing. maybe some conservatives who otherwise really wouldn't care when they see some of these things in operation and they see some of the problems that people have and the solutions that are required will change their thinking. That's only a hope. But I guess in part what you're saying is you've seen this lots of times before, and is anything really going to happen this time? And are you guys really going to put your money where your mouth is? I think that's in part what you're saying, and that's a perfectly legitimate question. And all I can tell you is that we're trying our best to organize a constituency to make this happen for the right reasons.
I've seen
Whatever reasons other people might have.
there's at least 3 other people who want to speak, and the first is this gentleman here.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief because much of what this young man had said previous, I kind of feel like I'm piggybacking, if you will. But I think when we look at the systems, we look at the judicial system, we look at law enforcement, and we look at corrections. And corrections is basically a slice of the pie of what's going on in free society. And one thing that this young man had said, I think you really do have to concentrate. First off, you have disparities in communities racially, also socioeconomically. These are your high percentages of your prison population, those 2 groups. And we have to have something, first of all, there has to be some type of commitment by legislators for these communities, for these people, not as targets for political agenda, which is usually the case. In terms of incarcerating, another thing that the young man said, we have to look at an alternative to arrest, intervention. The arrest, and I've often said to many youngsters, is a life sentence. You may think it's a misdemeanor, but it goes beyond the status of the crime. You do your time, it's not like that arrest goes away and you got a clean slate and you go on with your life. You don't. You have now a brand which constricts all efforts from that point on. Does that mean that anybody who has an arrest can never go on to make it and prosper, so on and so forth, family, etc.? No, it does not. But it does mean that you will have more difficulty with that stigma than if you did not have it. I've worked in corrections. I've worked in corrections for 10 years. I've worked as a police officer for 21. All of my life has been devoted to criminal justice in some way, whether it's academic or in a professional agenda. And I think what we see time and time again is these, not just when the legislators talk about get tough on crime, all right, there's all what that's just by that proposal, one can almost successfully conclude that we know whose neighborhoods are going to be targeted. We know who's going to be arrested. We know that there's going to be some wide disparity in terms of who gets handcuffed and who's not. I think that everything that's been presented here, I did not read the book, but I'm never going to say anything negative towards any efforts of reducing your penal population, be it juvenile or adult. I do know that there are problems that you have when an individual is released, institutionalization versus deinstitutionalization. I've seen people who have functioned in a prison setting and ironically, when released, collapsed. They could not make it in free society because free society had closed the doors to them. And the magnitude for every individual who has been arrested, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's individuals out there whose behavior, whose conduct is that threatening to the point that they should not be arrested. That's a different group. But you also have, but with that is a group who is nonviolent, for which much of this population is based, who in some cases live productive lives. If we want to look at, and the war on drugs is a very interesting one because basically it's saying that someone is now facing draconian sentences, has been criminalized because they like to get high. and at the same time, there's other people getting high that are not being incarcerated or diverted into some type of substance abuse program. Again, we have to look before the brand is really put on the back. That's first and foremost. And I think that will play a huge, significant role in terms of, and what takes place in corrections and the aftermath upon release, probation, and parole as a backstep. Not backstep, but as a secondary agenda. But that first agenda, that primary agenda, has to be addressed, because that will also make whatever efforts you have in corrections that much more easier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is CharlesOxley. I hope you'll listen carefully because I have an accent. I came from the British West Indies, Barbados, 35 years ago. And one of the things that really amazes me is that I was doing my criminal justice degree, and as I was reading about the incarceration rate here in the United States, and when I look at the total population of Barbados, I said, this is a small city in jail. And it's shameful, is heartbreaking, it's disappointing for America to incarcerate their people like that. I mean for small, petty crimes. Because about 12 years ago, a guy was arrested for a joint of marijuana, and he was put in jail for 15 years. And these are things that is not right. And nobody in this country, well, this is a good start. But I'll tell you this right now, where we came from. In my studies in 1964, the president of the United States, I think it was Johnson, he gave the judges, the federal judges, free leverage to sentence people as they like. You come in front of the court, bam, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. This is not good. America is a good country, it's a great country. But we got to change the system. We have to change the system. 4 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, the governor of Malloy said that he is going to look at the incarceration system in America, in Connecticut. He hasn't done nothing. He hasn't done nothing about that. You know, and this is the problem. So judges send people to jail. Police officers arrest you, go in front of the court, goodbye. Husbands, wives, children. And this is the problem. And it filtered from there right down into the school system. So we have to change the whole structure of America, especially Connecticut. We have to change the structure of Connecticut that people will be respectable and fair gains, fair treatment, and deserve, if you slap your wife, I don't know about that, but if you slap your wife, you go to prison for 3 months or what, fine. Not 10 years and 8 years. That's all I got to say.
Again, can't argue. And I do have a response to that. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm David Viklund. For about over 20 years, I was executive director of the Connecticut Law Revision Commission, a legislative law commission. And probably 25 years ago, the commission was asked by the legislature to study drug policy in Connecticut and make specific recommendations. We did that. The report's probably a 2-year report to prepare that report. It probably is a little bit longer than your book, but it had 22 specific recommendations. Several of those included, one of those was to increase the treatment of offenders for drug and alcohol abuse in prison, because nearly 80% of the folks in prison have a substance abuse problem, and only about 10 to 15% get treatment in any 1 year. And in fact, when you ask the prison officials, how do you do that? They said, well, if you have already been in prison once and received drug treatment and you return to prison and want to receive treatment again, you go to the end of the line. Well, why is that? because we want to punish you because you ought to know that you've had your chance. Now, that's contrary to all the medical information which says the more often you're in a drug treatment program, the more likely you are to succeed or at least be drug-free or at least interact with the criminal justice system after you finish that second or third time. Yet the prison system is set up to punish. And so there's one way you could do that.
Is there no redemption?
Redemption's not, I'm not speaking about redemption. My question is good public policy. If we want better results, the prison system needs to change. And there's a result we could do. The legislator was asking, what are specific things we can do? Half the people who have that 80% will, in fact, according to then Commissioner Armstrong, said would receive drug treatment programs, treatment if they could have it. Yet only a very small percentage each year could have it. And these guys are captive, literally captive, ready to receive treatment. We also recommended a program similar to Rikers Island. If you showed up in prison, in jail with methadone or with heroin or some opiate in your system, and you're there for a short period of time, to invite you to be on a methadone program in prison if you're there for a short period of time, so when you get out of prison, you would then be transferred to a methadone program in the community to cut the cycle of people who otherwise are heroin dependent. They're in prison, they're there for less than a year, they get out, they're looking for heroin, they go back into use heroin again, they get arrested for that, they also have high risk behavior for AIDS and hepatitis. So we proposed that to the legislature. Then Warden Teresa Lands and I went to the Rikers Island prison to view that process. A horrible place, by the way. It's a horrible place. And to view that system. We talked with all medical personnel. It's been around for about 18 years in Rikers Island. They have a great success rate in terms of reducing the recidivism. Commissioner Lands, or then Warden Lands, she then had private conversations that I didn't know about with guards who said they didn't like the program. The wardens loved the program because they said it quieted the prisoners down. The guards didn't like it because they were being soft on the prisoners. Came back to here, Connecticut. We tried to propose it, and it was squashed in the legislature. We then had a conference at Trinity College on drug policy. I was speaking there. Commissioner Lands, she was then now Commissioner of Corrections, was there. And a researcher from Yale, the Addiction Center, he was there. And he came up to me and he said, I've just finished a paper studying methadone treatment in prisons in Puerto Rico and the great success of that thing. And I said, let me introduce you to Commissioner Lands. And you can tell her that too. It's just not me telling her that. So he did. She listened politely, and then she said, we are never going to have methadone in our prisons. Of course, she wasn't correct because we have methadone in prisons for women under federal court order. Also proposed methadone treatment in our drug courts and in our alternative sanctions programs. The then chief state's attorney in a meeting stood up and banged his hand on the table and said, we will not facilitate drug use with methadone. The room was filled with treatment professionals, docs, and other treatment professionals. They did not speak up. They were intimidated by guys with badges and guns. Those are specific things that are in that report that have not yet been done here in Connecticut. Increase the number of treatment programs here in the neighborhoods. Absolutely critical. Question was about, have we addressed, we don't address very well persons of color, neighborhoods of color. The time we did the Sentencing Project had first reported 25% of the young men in the United States between 17 and 32 were in the criminal justice system. In the time we did the report, that 25% went up to 33.33%. People recognize the problem, but they are not able to address that problem. And I invite, in fact, it was so difficult in the legislature that the then president of the Senate didn't like our report, even though we'd been invited to do the report. It was put so much political pressure on him that he ultimately defunded the Law Revision Commission, and that commissioner is now our tax collector in the state of Connecticut. So we should understand that things can happen, but the legislators need to be able to do it and have good cover to do that. There are specific things that our report has in there. About half of them have been done, but the other half, the report's available online. I haven't read your report, but my guess is a lot of things you're proposing are exactly right. I would speak to former legislators who are then judges. I'd say, what one thing could we do in the legislature to make your job better as you have an offender before you? And to a person, these judges, former legislators said, one said, I was really too tough on some of these judicial candidates. It's really a tough job being a judge out here. The one thing that almost everyone said, we need more diversionary programs. Not diversionary programs into jail, but programs where we can send offenders where they don't have to end up in jail. So it's possible to do these things, but it takes money and it takes a political will, and it's hard to do in a political climate that wants to be tough on crime instead of smart on crime. Thank you.
Good evening. I want to know, do you have anything in your book on the judicial reviews process? I really believe that a lot of prisoners in jail have been held back with paperwork, appeals, reviews, basically information that they have submitted for alias things that have gone wrong with the judicial process, whether it was the judge doing something false or their own lawyers submitting the wrong documents or not submitting documents at all. I really say this because I'm going to give you an example of a young lady that told me she was in front of the judge and the prosecutor pulled her uniform because she was in jail already and told her, "You don't want to mess with me." So what I'm saying is I guess I'm basically focused on the corruption that's going on in our judicial system. There's a lot of biasness. There's a lot of uneven balance. And one of the things that I did hear was supposed to be process or in function. I think it was in New Haven. I'm not sure if it was in New Haven or not, but it was the bond system. They were supposed to be reviewing the bond system, and they had so much research done on it, how, Jack could come and he would get a bond, and then Millie would come and she wouldn't get no bond, and yet it was the same crime. They had the same background, and just the uneven balance. But again, what I guess I wanted to see is that was there any emphasis placed on the judicial part? Because I really believe that there's a lot of corruption in our judicial system, a lot of things going wrong, a lot of people speaking out, but again, their paperwork or evidence or whatever, however it's done, has been, buried, burnt up, whatever they do. And I really feel that this is what's holding back a lot of people from basically getting out of jail. So I want to know if you have anything.
I am aware of that problem. We do have recommendations, not just legislative ones, but ones that the Judicial Department could undertake on their own. And I don't know whether that one is in there, but I will check on that. You make a good point. I know about those problems.
One of the biggest problems with the system is transparency. We need, as residents, we need to see more of what happens. And the more transparent they are, the more we know what we need to do. Because I work in the system, there's a lot that the system does that's very good, and it serves a very good purpose. But there's a lot that happens. There are a lot of deliberations and things that are secretive, where discretion is used. And so the more transparent system players are and procedures are, the more informed we are, and the better we understand the system and what we need to do. And any effort in terms of public confidence and trust is about seeing what's going on. And if it happens behind closed doors, we're in trouble.
For example, what particular system within the criminal justice system would you say is lacking and therefore needs the transparency?
So, as an example, we saw the whole war on drugs thing happen. But what nobody did is looked at how all the money was put into prosecution, police, and corrections, and not defense. So now the people are less equipped. So if I'm sending you off to war, and I give you a shield and an AK-47 and all this equipment and tanks, and the person you're fighting with has rocks and sticks, okay? It's clear who's going to win. The indigent defense system is broken in terms of how poor people are represented.
What is it you're suggesting, and maybe we can narrow that a little
Yeah.
bit to Connecticut?
So
What is it you're suggesting that we should have a view or a window into that we don't? For example, I know that in terms of the juvenile system, notwithstanding some efforts that have been and continue to be afoot, and actually some legislation that's passed to open that system up a little bit more. But notwithstanding that, I'm trying to we know our courts otherwise are open to the public.
they are open to the public.
We know our legislature is
you know that what happens in that courtroom is very different than what happens in those chambers. You know
Well,
that
that's true. So I'm just trying to understand where it is you're saying we need to open up more. Clearly, you're not going to open up the judge's
you're
chamber.
never going to open up the chambers, but you can look at some of the procedures. I don't think the public is aware. So when the prosecutor says, you don't want to mess with me, well, you know what? That prosecutor is immune from liability of any type. He's immune. You can't sue him. Okay? You can do nothing to him.
But I'm trying to get to the transparency.
So the transparency is being able to document those kinds of issues in a way and challenging our legislators to say, wait, maybe they don't need absolute immunity. Maybe we're talking about qualified immunity. That certain things should never be acceptable. And that the process should not be to throw out the case because the prosecutor screwed up. It should be throw out the prosecutor. Okay? But if I'm completely immune from liability, what incentive do I have to follow the law?
Or for that matter, why shouldn't a prosecutor be liable if he or she is somehow involved in presenting false evidence or withholding evidence from a defendant? The person is found guilty, and there isn't a thing you can do. Why is that person still a prosecutor? I mean, isn't that the same sort of...
Yeah.
We have a couple other people who want to speak, and time is starting to run out, so let's move on.
One of the things that struck me while you were talking tonight is the fact that I think somebody brought this up earlier, that your presentation downplays that this is a problem for people of color. It really does downplay it, and I think you can't downplay that. You know, this is important, and I'll just share with you from our experience here in the library. People in Hartford not only have a disproportionate number of arrests and incarceration, but they have an achievement gap. They have a digital literacy divide. There's an economic gap, and it runs along racial lines. And that's a very serious problem, I think, for our city. We are arresting kids in schools, and for youngsters to be arrested and not diverted is part of the problem. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of things have got to be changed, beginning with opportunities that go to our young families who have newborn children and need to get the assistance at that point to make sure that youngsters are ready to read for school and then have successful lives. That is also part of the solution. I think this is fine. This reduces maybe the cost of incarceration and recidivism. But the key is, how do you start to correct the problem and make life much easier for people who deserve that as Americans? And I think that we have to see that starting from birth up through the education system and so on. And I think we all get that, but that's why this problem is much more multifaceted than just incarceration. I think it's about a total plan on how do you resolve disparities. Why are people in our city less healthy than people in the suburbs? I mean, there are these issues that we've got to address in total in order for this to happen. It's a great step, but I really would encourage you to really shine a light on the problem that this affects our young minority males more than anything else, and we've got to figure out a way to correct that. It's a serious, serious problem.
I think you're quite right. I think if you read the book, you'll find quite a bit of that in there that I didn't present tonight. In the future, I think I will. But it is an elephant in the room issue, and I tend to put it into the poverty issue is the largest elephant in the room issue, and all of the things that go along with persons who are in those circumstances in Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, and any number of other cities in the state. We don't deal with that as a part of this issue, and I think that it needs to be dealt with. I did a lot of work with the Anti-Poverty Agency. I think Anti-Poverty Agency should be redesigned from the ground up, and their focus should be on many of the things that we're talking about here today. But that's a whole other set of opinions that I have about that.
We're going to go to Warren next, but Doug has asked if he can make a quick comment on this topic.
2 quick examples of transparency. Okay, so I had a friend of mine who went to court in Hartford for a case that he was dealing with. It was a nollie. He got a nollie, which a lot of people are thankful to get a nollie, but nollie is not good. Okay, so when you get a court case, it's nollie, still go on your record until a year or whatever. However, that person was told by the prosecutors, point blank, no one, because he really wanted to get his case dismissed, no one in Hartford get their case dismissed. If you're from Hartford, and now I got to do my research, no one in Hartford will get their case dismissed. The best you will get is a nollie. That's not right. That's not right. Okay. The prosecutor told them, you don't get your case dismissed in Hartford. You might get a nollie. Second thing, it was spoken about Board of Pardon and Parole. When it first was put together back in, I believe it was 2009, that system was working. People were coming out, getting their pardons. It was working. It only took 3 to 4 months. Now it takes a year just to get your case looked at, okay? Another thing I want to say, and it's not a Democrat-Republican issue, okay? Because that was put in place with a Republican governor. So those are things, when you talk about transparency, those are just some of the small things that happen in the system. And a lot of this comes down to what you said. Do we have the political will to make the change?
That's the deal.
That's it. That's the deal.
That's the
That's
whole
what
deal.
it comes down to.
Okay, we're going to go to Warren here. Warren?
Good evening. I just wanted to say, have you done any of these conversations inside the prisons? Because me, personally, when I first came in and I, was just looking at your presentation, I was like, wow, I'm ready, and I'm a former convict. So I'm ready to, stand and try to do what I can to try to achieve that, because it is a money issue, but at the end of the day, it's a life and death situation that's at hand. So if individuals that's really paying a price for doing a lot of time for, crimes that wasn't really that violent and it just continues to happen, they're the one that need to know that, okay, we need your help, on this situation, because numbers do speak. If it is a lot of individuals that's, and they have the ability to go into their community and bring other people. And that's something that's rare, because that don't really happen, but it's possible. So I think that you should probably try to get into some type of prison or maybe a halfway house or something like that, and do the same presentation and just let individuals know, yes, we understand that it's a money issue, but when you present at things at a life and death situation, it has the tendency to move individual and give a different perspective, and then you'll get better results.
I think that's a great idea. And the justice reinvestment idea is, in part, powerful, we think, because you can't make the argument that there is no money, because the money is already being spent on the prisons. But if you take that money, shutting down various numbers of facilities, and then using those funds to develop services that people really need, people really need, really use, that really work. The one thing I like about this approach is in other words, is that money is the non-issue, because we want it reinvested in community alternatives. But I do think that, I think part of what you were saying is that there's never been a successful program working with inmates or offenders or anybody else that doesn't listen loud and clear to the needs of the people they're trying to help. I mean, that just goes with the territory, I think. Is there the political will? I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, I think that if we can put together a grassroots movement comprising people like us in this room who work hard, contact their legislators, give them material they can work with, like the stuff in this book is very well researched. You can count on it. It's not pie in the sky. Give them material you can work with. I think we have a shot at getting something done here. So that's what we need to do. That's what's next. I mean, I have some of the individual questions that people have asked. I don't know how you address. I don't know how you address an arrogant culture and a prosecutor saying, "We ain't getting nothing here but what I give out." I mean, I don't know how you can address those kinds of things. But watchdog groups are effective in addressing those kinds of things. You know, they're in the courtroom reporting on those kinds of things. I know that's effective. The light of day is a tremendous disinfectant. We are talking about recommending various committees and commissions to look into how to improve this, that, or the other thing, because there's some of this stuff that can be done not by legislation, but has to be done administratively. Maybe there need to be citizens included in those commissions who have had the experience of observing what some of you have pointed out that you have observed, to get people to look at this stuff. I don't know, but are there some more questions?
Any final questions or comments before we wrap up? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank Ed Quinlan and the Malta Initiative. How about a round of applause for Ed? And Ed, if people want to buy the book, they can...
We're selling it. We're using it as a fundraiser so that we can do more of this. And if you'd like to give us some contact information, name, email address, phone number, so that we can contact you in the future, please do so. If you can help us, you might want to indicate that in organizing.
And I think you have copies here tonight, right?
Pardon?
You have copies here tonight.
We have copies
here
tonight.
So I think at the table on your way out, if you're interested, you can buy the book. So I want to thank you all for coming. This is an enormously important and complex topic. And we certainly didn't solve it tonight, but we took maybe a baby step in the right direction. And I appreciate you all being here to do that together. The library is going to be looking for other opportunities to help you, the community, all of us get to solutions. Not easy to do, but as Ed says, if we work together, we can make some progress. So again, thank you so much, and have a good evening.